Important than ever that we stand united and show our evil to win. Here's the president.
For us to lower the temperature in our politics. And to remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors. We're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled it before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer, whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times that the choice in this election we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, or God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to make America, think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created a democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
And there you have President Biden from the Oval Office in a rare address, beginning his comments by saying we need to lower the temperature in our politics. I want to bring in Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. And Nancy, this is the third time we've heard from the president about the assassination attempt. Why has he chosen to speak so regularly to the American people on this topic?
Well, because the Oval Office, Nora, is the ultimate symbol of continuity. It has flowed from Republicans to Democrats, back to Republicans. It is a sign of the strength of this democracy, and it was a fitting location for this president as he made a call at a time when the American people are quite rattled for unity. He went on to give a brief update on the investigation, but really what he wanted to talk about was political violence and the heated rhetoric that can often fuel that violence. We're still 3.5 months out from Election Day, and there is a desire from both parties to bring down the temperature so we don't see something like this happen again.
Nancy, stay with us from the White House. Want to bring in Major Garrett, our chief Washington correspondent. And what did you make of the president's comments?
So the president is trying to stitch together a country that has a deep memory about what it has found offensive about the other political party. And everyone in America who is very partisan knows exactly what drives them crazy about what the other party says about them. And they can recount it almost in verse. Faults, aggressive language, things that they thought crossed a line and they can't forgive. What the president is saying, that's the past. If we're going to move forward in this election and do so peacefully, we don't have to forget that, but we have to forgive one another for rhetorical excesses. And I think we'll have a sign of that, Nora, if anyone in political leadership who has said something that is viewed in this current context as excessive, crossing the line, not only says we should bring the temperature down, but I apologize. I shouldn't have said what I said 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. That could apply to President Biden. It could apply to former President Trump. It could apply to many members of Congress. That will be, to my mind, consistent with what the president is asking the country to do and political leaders to do. Not only bring the temperature down going forward, but be reflective about how the rhetoric up until now has created this sense, not only of division, but anger and a sense of isolation and alienation from one another.
You're not expecting anybody to apologize, are you?
I'm not, but I'm saying that is a measure for Americans who are trying to gauge just how real this moment is. Is this a glimmer of light in what has been rhetorically a very dark space for this country, or is it just a momentary pause in which we will calm things down and then return to our partisan battlements? I don't know. But I do know if someone who's been in the public arena does apologize, that will be an act of reflection that might have some longevity.
Want to bring in Robert Costa. He is our chief election and campaign correspondent. And Robert, I know you have covered a number of these conventions as well. They are generally full of speeches that are full of red meat. You are trying to rile up your most fervent supporters and draw a very sharp contrast with your opponent. Is there any indication that that will change?
Nora, good to be with you. This was not a campaign moment tonight for President Biden. It was an attempt to have a presidential moment. I was speaking to confidants of President Biden. They know, as you say, the Republican National Convention begins tomorrow. But they also know if you took just 2 or 3 steps away from the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, what would you see? A bust not of a former president, but of someone who almost became president, someone who ran and died in 1968. President Biden keeps a bust of Robert F. Kennedy, the former New York senator, in the Oval Office. Every day he looks at it, I'm told, and he thinks about Robert F. Kennedy's speech after Martin Luther King was gunned down, Dr. King, in 1968. Robert F. Kennedy spoke to the nation's better angels. He quoted a poet, Aeschylus, as he tried to ask the nation to come together. Biden in the Senate in the 1970s sees assassination attempts against President Ford, sees President Reagan shot in 1981. Someone's for a half century on the American scene watching violence. Violence prompts him into the race. After Charlottesville in 2017, he ultimately wins the presidency in 2020. So this is a moment where a convention is beginning. But it is also a presidential moment where you have the current occupant of the office communicating to the country about an attack on his predecessor, an unprecedented moment and a moment of fragility in the American political system.
It's an excellent point, Robert. I want to bring back in Nancy Cordes, who covers the White House. And there's clearly an element of hope within all of this. President Biden hoping that the rhetoric can change. But that's, it's a hope. It's difficult, certainly for these candidates in this political climate. What about what President Biden has been saying in a number of the comments that he made, even earlier today?
Right. So he's hoping for the best, but also preparing for the worst. And he laid out some action items when it comes to security after he met with his national security team in the Situation Room. First of all, he said that he has consistently pushed for former President Trump to have all of the security that he needs, and he will continue to do so going forward to make sure that Mr. Trump is safe. Second, he said he had called upon the head of the Secret Service to take a look at all of the security that's planned for the Republican National Convention, which gets underway tomorrow, where you are in Milwaukee right now, to see if there's anything more that needs to be done that hadn't been planned yet. And then finally, Nora, he said that he was calling for an independent review of the security situation at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania yesterday. He's clearly aware of all of the questions that are swirling out there about how this shooter could have gotten so close to the former president in the first place. Clearly doesn't believe that the Secret Service or even the Department of Homeland Security can do this investigation itself, looking at what possibly went wrong. And so that's going to be done by some sort of outside entity. We don't know which yet.
Yeah, the FBI Director Christopher Wray, the Attorney General today, is saying that this assassination attempt was an attack on democracy. Want to bring in Scott McFarland because Scott was there at the rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania, when the shooter opened fire. Scott, good to talk to you again. And when you hear the president's remarks, how do you think they'll be received?
A person in the 9th row of the shooting spree yesterday, Nora, says, I guess this is what our county is going to be known for now, forever. Linked to an attempted assassination of a president. Butler County, Pennsylvania is just north of the county in which Pittsburgh resides. It is Trump country. He won this county 2-1 in 2020. But what we're hearing from so many people here transcends concerns about politics and speaks to what the president just addressed, that there is a toxicity in our politics that is clearly dangerous. This is a traumatized community. Like I did in the front row of the press rafters, thousands of people at this rally watched chaos yesterday, had bullets whiz over their heads, saw children running and screaming. There is a visceral reaction and connection, Nora, Butler County, Pennsylvania has to what happened yesterday, and it's very little to do with politics.
Scott McFarland, thank you for your excellent coverage there. And, Major Garrett, that is true. Trump has a visceral connection with his supporters.
They see his campaign in 2016 as challenging all sorts of orthodoxies in America, starting with the Republican establishment, which they didn't think was responsive. Trump defeats that. Trump wins the presidency in a surprising 2016 outcome. And Trump supporters believe from that moment he was denied not only the idea that, hey, wow, you won a presidency. Isn't that amazing? Immediately ostracized, criticized, resistance, and pummeled and demonized by the left consistently. That is something that Trump supporters will not forget, cannot forget. And they overlook indictments. They overlook January 6th. They overlook fraud allegations and substantive proof of fraud on the president's part and his businesses, all because they believe he represents something fighting on their behalf and is relentlessly attacked. They will see this episode in Butler, Pennsylvania, as an extension of that, even though it is not. But back to the point the president made in his remarks. Partisan rhetoric does not exist in a vacuum. Partisans in our country right now, Nora, right and left, not only expect it, they demand it and they reward it. They reward it with their votes and they reward it with their small dollar donations. Everyone in the political arena knows that. That level of expectation, that demand curve, for aggressive rhetoric because you're fighting up for something that's so important is part of this equation. We are all wrapped up in that equation. The president tonight is asking us to consider our own involvement in that equation and reflect and possibly start anew.
The question is, will this be a turning point in this heated presidential election? Major Garrett, thank you. Ahead, we'll take a closer look at the investigation into the shooting and how it was possible for the gunman to get so close to Donald Trump.
For generations, heart disease has been our #1 killer, striking women of every age, color, and culture. Heart disease claims one woman every minute, killing more women than men and more women than all cancers combined. I don't know about you, but I intend to stay alive. Fight the lady killer. Get heart checked.
How was school?
I learned the monkey bars.
That's great. Music is so important.